Hi you guys, welcome back. My name is Carrie Penny. I am the Happy Crafty Homemaker, and today I am going to be reviewing Premier Poppy yarn. So I told you guys a couple weeks ago, one of the things I've been trying to do recently, let's see if we can maybe straighten that just a little bit, is finding actually true new yarns on the market. Unfortunately, we've kind of hit a stagnant point where we're not really seeing new yarns being released, or so I was able to find 2 yarns from Premier to review for you guys as we head into the holiday seasons, and we're building our wish list and gift list and stuff, and we're making our items to be gifted or trying to find gifts for our loved ones. I wanted to do some reviews and I wanted to talk to you guys about some new stuff, so Premier Poppy is a fairly recent release with the Premier. It is a very colorful yarn. I got 3 balls in parakeet, so I did get a particularly bright color. I will try to insert a screen grab here of the other color options. It's a bulky or super bulky weight yarn. It is 80% acrylic, 20% wool, 150 grams or 5.29 ounces, 98 yards or 90 meters. So it is a low meterage, but you are getting a super bulky yarn. The next yarn that I'll be reviewing for this series is actually just more doing a crochet review of the Premier anti-pilling painterly yarn, and that will be forthcoming. I am halfway through with my project for that so that I can share with you guys what's going on. So anyway, on to this review here. Hopefully next week we will have the review on painterly up, but I was very excited to see this. I don't normally work with a whole bunch of bulky and super bulky yarns. As many of you guys know, if you've been with my channel for a while, one of my goals has been to kind of work through my bulky, super bulky stash, because I just don't reach for those as often. A lot of times bulky and super bulky yarns tend to be very heavy on my wrist, and I just can't quite work through them like I would want to. So anyway, this was a very exciting offering. Not many of the easy accessible yarns on the market are wool blends. Most of them tend to be 100% acrylic or 100% wool. So finding a wool blend that was in that bulky, super bulky range was actually kind of exciting. This one also has a whole bunch of colors in the yarn, so all 4 of the colors. So I was pretty excited when I saw this release, and was able to get my hands on it. Now, first off, one of the things I want to talk to you about is how this yarn is constructed. So this is a 2-ply yarn. Ooh, we're blowing out just a little bit. There we go. This is a 2-ply yarn. Each ply is more like a single-ply roving yarn. So it is a very fluffy, very softly twisted ply. There's a very ever so slight twist to each ply. So it is not a dense yarn whatsoever. This is a very fluffy, ploofy yarn. Hold on just one second. Very sorry about that. I am expecting an important phone call at some point this morning, and I was kind of hoping that would be it, but it was not. So in this being the roving style in each ply that's been very softly twisted, it's got a very gentle twist. It leaves this yarn with a very nice squish and loft to it. So I know a lot of people, when they hear something has a wool content in it, they do tend to get a little bit nervous, especially if it doesn't specify things like superwash merino or something like that. I can tell you guys immediately on touching this, my first response was, ooh, soft. It is a very, very soft yarn. It is very easy running through your hands. There's no burrs. There's no bumps or anything else to this. This is a very gentle, soft, squishy yarn. As this is a loose ply yarn and loose twist yarn. I would be careful in doing anything with this that is going to be in a high rub zone, unless you're prepared to use a gleamer or some other form of anti-pilling tool, just because in particular, like where I live in the Southeast, even when it's cold, it's very moist. So things like underarms tend to stay very moist. However, I was thinking this would be really cool in a sweater if you did the arms and side panel in a solid, and then did everything inside the collar and down. So kind of like raglan, except with a side panel that followed down from the sleeve area in the poppy. That would be so cute. Chew. Excuse me. Anyway, so on initial touch, once again, this is very soft. This is very squishy. There's a nice loft to the fiber. There's no itchiness or tingliness or prickliness from the wool content in this. It is very, very, very squishy. I really loved just sitting here squishing the yarn. I mean, even in the ball, you can see how much loft is in that fiber. And the way the fiber is done, you have an alternating barber pole effect here as colors come in and out. Each ply is different. Some plies, you know, you're hitting the main background color with just a single color, and then other times the two plies, both the colors hit. So you've got this great, completely irregular patterning going on with this yarn. So as long as your color dye is the same, it wouldn't be super important to have like a matching dye lot with this, because you could easily blend in your colors. One of the things I do also like when you have a super bulky or bulky yarn that is very lofty like this, is it's easy to split the ply in order to weave in the ends, because we don't want to create bulk in weaving in the ends. So I do really like when you have a yarn like this where you can split the ply very easily and get an even pass at weaving in the ends. That's just a particular note to make on this yarn. So welcome to Premier Poppy. That is what it looks like. My colorway is Parakeet. But like I said, there are multiple other colors, and hopefully I did get that picture in there so you guys can see the other colors that are also available. So let's get into the working with it section. There we go. There's a word. So the first thing I did, I believe it is called Quello Principale. It is a cowl. Now this pattern is a free pattern. It is written for bulky yarn, not super bulky. So I decreased the number of stitches. Instead of doing 5 garter stockinette rows, I did 4. But the intention is for you to get this squishy texture while using a bulky yarn. So as I hold it up, you know, it does kind of fall out and drape just a little bit. But as I put it on, it squishes down around the neck, and you're still left with this texture of where you get the ribbing effect almost, where it falls down around your neck. So I did make mine extra, extra long, just for the off chance that we have below 30-degree days here this year. I can have something super mega squishy in my coat when I go outside. I have to say, around the neck, this is a joy. So I used a very basic stitch pattern because the yarn is very bulky. I didn't want anything stitch wise to get lost in the shuffle here, especially because this does have so much color and texture on the yarn itself. I didn't want anything to get lost. So I figured it was better to go with a very simple stitch pattern so we can really see the yarn, and we're not wasting time doing something fancy when the yarn can do most of the work for us. So this is what it looks knitted up. We do have a rib up here at the top. I used a size 11 needle at the top. I used a size 13 for the bottom and the bottom ribbing. And that's just because I wanted this to be able to flare out a little bit more along my collarbone, but I wanted the top to stay a little bit more cinched around my neck. I do that with a lot of cowls. It started actually because I was too lazy to go get my smaller needle, but I realized I like how that lays under my jacket or coat a lot more. So I've just kind of continued using it as a design element for myself. It's not something you would generally notice while wearing the garment, but holding it up like this, you can tell this ribbing band is a little bit smaller than this ribbed band. So I used my standard red lace ChowGoo needle. This is the 13. I used a 24-inch needle to work on this. And I had zero issues. I mean, I would love to say it like split or there was something fidgety or something. Not that I would love to say that, but I would love to have something to report back. It worked up beautifully. It slid across the needles beautifully. It was easy to work with. I had no problem getting through the stitches with it. I had no problem with having to be extra cautious because of the way it's a loose plied yarn or anything. The plies are not sticky because it is 80% acrylic, so they don't Velcro to each other like a 100% wool would. So I did want to make sure we weren't getting splitting and things like that. Now, I favor these needles particularly because they do tend to decrease splitting. They tend to make projects glide very easily. The join between the needle and the cable is super smooth, so I don't normally have my yarns getting hung in that join area. So I know I'm using a premium needle in doing this, but I don't think, unless you just have a really bad needle, anybody will have any issue in getting the same experience I did in working with this poppy yarn. It glides, it's smooth, it's very clean. You do have good stitch definition for it to be such a ploofy yarn, but the stitches do get kind of lost in that color pattern that is created with the alternating barber pole in there. So as far as the knit experience, just doing knits and purls and alternating, doing the ribbing, alternating back and forth, doing rows of purl stitches, rows of knit stitches, I had no issues with splitting. I had no issue in maintaining an even tension. It really was very, very nice to work with. I would love to see this in a worsted weight yarn as well, in the same texture. So, Premier, if you happen to stop by and listen, I would also love to see this in a worsted weight yarn, because I think you could get some really cool effects in using shadow designs where it looks like you've got inset, like the stained glass effect, where you have insets of color in a slip stitch or mosaic pattern. If you had a worsted weight version of this. Being a super bulky, it's a little too husky of a yarn to do patterns like that. So I would love to see something like this in a worsted or maybe a DK weight yarn. I think DK, you might lose the barber pulling. So worsted's probably where I would personally want to see it at. But it really did just fly off the needles. I had a lot of fun working with it. It was very easy to take in the car to work with. The yarn itself wasn't very fussy to work with. Now, I did use, I think I've got a picture that I can insert in here. I did use one of my vintage Pyrex bowls as a yarn bowl just because the ball was so large starting out. It is a 150 gram ball of yarn. And it is a lofty yarn, so it does take up space. I worked from the inside of the ball as well as from the outside of the ball, alternating while doing these projects. So I got to experience pulling the yarn from both directions. For this one in particular, I had no problem as the ball collapsed with tangling or anything pulling from the center. Although I did find, because the yarn is so lofty and light, I had no issues keeping the ball moving in the yarn ball if I pulled from the outside. So I would probably pull from the outside of the ball just because, but no tangling pulling from the inside or from the outside. It was a little harder to find the centerpiece coming from the inside directly. So I would go from the outside. Just a recommendation if you purchase this yarn. And I would definitely use a bowl of some form to contain your ball, just so you're not getting drag, felting, pilling, floofing, or anything else. But beautiful to work with my first project. Definitely love how that turned out. Super squishy. I love super squishy stuff. So I enjoyed the first project. Up next, I decided to get just a little bit fidgety with it. And I made an ear warmer using seed stitch. I did a W, where you fold it, take the two ends, fold it into a W shape and sew it together. Top knot on this one. So we have a much tighter cinch to the center of this ear warmer. That's what the seed stitch looks like in this yarn. But again, I had no issues alternating back and forth between the knits and purls with this. It wasn't overly cumbersome or fidgety or anything else. I still had no splitting. By now we're in fully into the second ball. The cowl took 1.5 balls. This one took the other half of the second ball. And my knot, because I did that tighter knot, it is a little bit more protruding on the head, I suppose, but I still think it is super cute. This is going to be so warm to wear during the winter, just keeping my ears warm. I've told you guys before here on the channel, one of my biggest things in the winter isn't that I'm cold, but it's like my ears and jaw area get very cold. So I wish there was more I could say, but truthfully, even alternating knits and purls back and forth, I did not have any issue with splitting, the texture causing a problem, or anything else. We do have a very different look. The yarn looks different in the seed stitch versus knits and purls, stockinette and garter stitch. So it did create a different texture. The way the color play, it did feed just a little bit differently in the way the yarn appears. But once again, because of the way it's barber poled, we didn't get any blocks of color. Everything stayed very well distributed and dispersed, so you don't have to worry about getting, flashing or anything like that with this yarn. So once again, we've got a nice, dense, super squishy. I mean, you see how squishy those stitches stayed. Once again, I used the size 13 needle for this. Super mega squishy. Let's see. I forgot to tell you what the recommended needles were. The recommended needle is a 13 for knitting, and it's an M-13 9mm for crochet. So once again, that recommendation gives you this mega squishy, pluffy, very pleasant fabric to work with. The size 11 did not make it feel that much denser though. I use a relaxed tension. I don't use a super tight tension when I knit. I'm generally pretty true to gauge when I knit. So once again, I feel like I'm using lots of words to say it's good. I liked it, and the experience was nice. Like, it was a really genuinely nice experience to work with this yarn. I was very pleasantly surprised because, once again, bulky yarns tend to make my wrist ache. It's a little bit harder to work with them. I can't go as quickly. But I didn't have any issue with this. It did not feel heavy on the needles. It didn't feel heavy on my wrist to work with it. And it's so pliable and lofty as you're making the stitches, the physical mechanism of moving your needles and stuff. I had zero issues with it. So I was very, very pleased with that as the outcome here. The last thing I did with this yarn, I got 3 projects out of 3 balls. I was very pleased with myself. So I did another ear warmer. Now this one is half double crochets, alternating, working in the front loop and back loop. So we keep a ridge every row to give you kind of a faux ribbing look on this. For the knot closure here, I used the double C where you interlock the two sides with each other. So we have a much flatter knot on this one, and it's a much wider knot on this one. I probably should have aesthetically in brain design alternated which knots I used and used the flatter knot on what I thought was going to be the chunkiest. Now this did end up being the chunkiest, but I didn't plan that. I thought this was going to feel a little bit looser, but it does not. There we go on. It's a little bit wide for my little head, but this one will probably be gifted or donated, as it is machine washable. I can donate this to certain places, but once again, the color worked up beautifully. Now for this one, I did use my Clover Amour hook, and this one is a 10 millimeter. So I did go up a hook size for this just to keep a super loose fabric. I didn't want it to be overly, I didn't want my stitch height to get compressed. I wanted to maintain the height while working in the back loop. So these are half double crochets. And once again, we've got a nice edge. It's a nice thick squishy edge. So even in the crochet where it's more knotting the yarn versus looping the yarn, we did not get any hard bits or bulky bits in here. Everything, even in the crochet stitch, stayed very lofty and squishy. So out of a 10, I would probably, if this were worsted weight, give it a 9.5. But I'm going to go ahead and give it a 9 because it is super bulky. It is what it is as far as the size goes. However, the colors are phenomenal. The texture is super smooth. Even using the fat plastic headed hook, which I've told you guys is not my favorite texture to work with, this still moves very smoothly on the yarn. There's no issue with this hanging. Now, the way I crochet, I kind of hold between a knife and a pencil, and I rotate my fingers as I crochet instead of making this motion as I crochet. So less riding the waves and more rocking as I crochet. And with this type of head on the hook, I did not have an issue with splitting unless I was going way too fast or not paying attention. If I was just calmly in a rhythm working this with that soft rock to the hook, I didn't have any issues with splitting. Now, when I was like trying to really get in there, or I was watching more TV than paying attention to how I was hooking like the yarn over in particular, then maybe I would get a little bit of splitting, but it really wasn't a splitty yarn. It wasn't fussy to work with, even with the crochet hook with a plastic head or nylon head. I'll be honest, I was really impressed with that, but I do crochet in a way that does minimize splitting. Like I said, I alternated back and forth whenever I had to change the ball. When I worked from the outside versus the inside, I crocheted from the outside of the ball in. So just heads up, if the twist is going to matter as far as knitting and crochet, I crocheted from the outside of the ball in and had zero issues with splitting. So that could have an impact. I'm not entirely sure, but I did want to be completely honest about how I worked through this. So all in all, I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. I enjoyed the experience. I love the colors. The texture and squish to this is absolutely dreamy. The only caveat to working with this is I would not do anything that is going to be largely weight bearing. So I would definitely not make like a bag out of this yarn unless you're using like a very dense cotton as a carry along with it to strengthen the fabric. The yarn itself is it has good tensile strength. However, if at any point something does separate your ply, you can get drafting on this. I think I'm holding it too tight. As the soft twist in this does relax, there we go. You will get drafting, so it will draft apart on you. And that's not a desired effect. And a lot of times when you have something that is weight bearing, you can have the fibers kind of subtly shift out of sync, out of phase. But as far as like I said, even on a sweater, I would probably, unless you want to pay particular care to like your underarm area for pilling, I would love to see this in like a raglan style sweater where the center part is made out of the poppy and maybe the side like racer stripes down the side. I mean, that also for a woman's body can accentuate, you know, that hourglass shape. But seeing that in a solid where you're really letting the color play on the front, this would be perfectly fine in a cardigan or a sweater where it's not necessarily under the arms. Hat, scarves, cowls, shawls, I don't see why not. Something like slipper socks, you would actually probably be able to get away doing with this if you want some really, really, really bulky sweater socks. The soles would probably get a little mashed. They won't really felt because it's got acrylic in it, but the bottom might start to take on a much more smooth texture as you walk around in them. But I don't think that would actually be too much of an issue with how low of a hook you would have to drop back to maintain like a tighter texture. I don't think this would make bad slipper socks. This would make amazing boot cuffs and leg warmers though. So you've got a wide variety of projects I would recommend with this yarn personally. It's soft, it's squishy, and it's nice to work with. And the care instructions are pretty easy on this. I mean, this is a pretty standard yarn as far as that goes. So I hope you guys enjoy it. If you've worked with the poppy yarn, leave a comment down below and let me know what you thought about the experience. Did you knit with it? Did you crochet with it? What did you make with it? What was your overall opinion? A lot of my subscribers do actually read the comments when we do these yarn review videos. So definitely check out the comment section down below and see what other people think. As always, I tell you guys, don't make me your only stop for yarn reviews or product reviews, because everybody has a different experience. Everybody has a different time. There have been yarns I did not like using that other people loved. There have been yarns I have loved that other people had issues with. So definitely check out the comment section down below. Please feel free to share with everybody what your experience has been working with the Premier Poppy. What colors did you love? Which one did you work with the most? And I hope you guys enjoy. There is a link in the description box down below. I have an affiliate code with Premier, but it doesn't cost you anything if you decide to order directly from them through my code. But it does kind of help me out a little bit to afford yarns to purchase for the sake of review here. As always, I love you guys. I hope you're having a wonderful, fantastic day. Next week, we should have a show and tell here on Thursday instead of another product review. But it's been a busy time of year and there are lots of things going on, and I'm very excited to see what happens for the next couple weeks. So take care and I will see you guys soon. Bye guys.